ಇಂದು ಭಾರತದ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರ ಡಿಜಿಟಲ್ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮದ ಮುಂದಿರುವ ಸವಾಲುಗಳು ಎಂಬ ವಿಷಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಜನಶಕ್ತಿ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ವಿಚಾರ ಸಂಕಿರಣ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಂಡಿತ್ತು. ಈ ವಿಚಾರ ಸಂಕಿರಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಏಷ್ಯಾ ಕಾಲೇಜ್ ಆಫ್ ಜರ್ನಲಿಸಂನ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಾದ ಶಶಿಕುಮಾರ್ ಅವರು ದಿಕ್ಸೂಚಿ ಭಾಷಣ ಮಾಡಿದರು.
We think of heights and depths as being associated with profundity, with being profound. Something is, you acquire heights of knowledge, you acquire depths of knowledge, you delve into depths of knowledge. The problem with linear technology is it moves on a flat surface. It privileges flatism. It privileges linearity. It privileges flatism, not heights or depths. And therefore, if you look at the jargon of digital technology, as you know, we talk about surfing the net, right? You talk about spanning, scanning. The terminology is all terminology of breadth, not of height or depth. It's all on a flat surface, right? So it is a very big distinction that has taken place from the industrial era to the industrial revolution to what we call the information and communications technology revolution, or the ICT revolution. So the shift is, first of all, from the linear to the non-linear, from depth and height to surface phenomena to flatism. Flatism, as Thomas Friedman calls, the world is flat. Of course, we wish the world is flat, but I think what they mean by that when you say the world is flat is if you connect up the dots of the IT sectors in various parts of the world, let's say Bangalore, Los Angeles, Silicon Valley, Chennai, or wherever, Tokyo. So that will look very flat. It will look as if the world is flat. But we know, particularly in our context in Asia and in India, that the world is not flat. In fact, the world has become even more warped. The rich have become richer, the poor have become poorer. There are two worlds. There's a world of the rich and the world of the poorer. And in terms of digital technology, it has created more billionaires or trillionaires than industrial revolution can ever have created. Digital capitalism is the most acute form of capitalism the world has ever seen. We have not seen capitalism of this order. Because if you take the big 5 digital capitalists in the world today, each of them, their net worth will be probably several times the GDP of many nations in the country, So they are not just it's not monopoly capitalism. Monopoly capitalism is a mild term to apply to them. This is a kind of new kind of acute, virulent kind of capitalism. Although it looks benign, because when we speak about digital technology, normally we think in terms of a more democratic technology. We say, oh, digitization means all of us can access the technology. All of us are able to participate in internet. All of us can talk to each other on internet. All of us can start portals, can start businesses on the internet. Entrepreneurship is possible on this digital technology. But in real fact, if you look at it economically and financially, in terms of who has the powers, who has the levers in this whole technology, even in the internet space, it is a big 5 or 6, We don't need to name them. And these are people who started off very humbly, perhaps. There's no doubt about that. If you look at, the big players in that, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or the Apple founder, or, many of them, they started as small, shall we say, garages in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley garage is a kind of important idea, in a kind of workshop or a shed. They start and they become digital capitalists. But I'm saying digital technology has created capitalism of an entirely new order, which perhaps even Karl Marx could not, anticipate. That kind, because surplus labor and, several of his theories, idea of superstructure and base in cultural realm and Marxism, all these are being challenged by this new order of digital technology. Therefore, what I'm trying to suggest is what you call the break, the disruption, has created from the linear to the non-linear technology, has created an entirely new model, an entirely new paradigm. In other words, there is a paradigm shift when you think about the shift from the industrial revolution to the ICT revolution, or the information and communications technology revolution. As I said, one of the big shifts is that we are thinking in terms of surfaces, in terms of breadth. The breadth has become more privileged than height or depth. I'm stating this because it's important to understand how this technology works and how it affects our particular context in India. For instance, as I said, if you consider the language use, we talk about surfing the net, right? So it's a surface phenomenon. We don't talk about diving into depths of knowledge in the net or ascending heights of knowledge in the net. The terminology is one of breadth, not of height or depth. And therefore, our understanding, lateral thinking, the idea of lateral thinking is privileged. Hypertext, you go from one information to another information. It's all on the surface plane. It's not, you're not, very few people are looking at one thing and moving into it in a height or depth. So this we must understand. And in this process, the other important thing that has happened is in the linear technology, in the industrial age, we had cause and effect. We had sequential way of understanding things. As I said, Cartesian principle, I think, therefore I am. In digital technology, it's a simultaneous understanding of many things. We speak about multimedia, we speak about multitasking, we speak about integration of multimedia, because what has happened is all the forms of media, for instance, the visual media, the audio media, the text, and immersivity, the emoticons, all these are coming together and creating a new experience, a new sensorium for us, a new way for us to understand the world. So in this new world, it is not a particular cause and effect sequence that is working. Particularly if you look at the millennial new generation, I deal with a lot of young students, and they're all digital natives. They're all born in the 1980s, let's say, and so on, mid 80s, 90s, so they're all digital natives. And for them, the smartphone is like the extension of their arm. It's like a prosthetic arm, if you like. And for them, this whole lateral thinking, this whole surface phenomenon, this whole simultaneous understanding of the world. Digitization means, say, pixels, right? In technological terms, it's a pixelated world. So I'm able to look at a television screen today. I'm seeing so many elements. If you look at a financial television screen today, there are so many elements in it. There is a speaking image like me. There will be three or four bands below that special image will say flash news, will say stocks and commodities, weather, so, and then in between there'll be visuals. 15 to 16 elements simultaneously appear on a screen to capture your imagination. Now, that's not a linear process. That's a process of simultaneously understanding what is happening. Of course, in your brain, in your process, you will prioritize one or the other element at a particular point in time. But the fact of the matter is that somebody has created this technology, including so many disparate different elements, comprising visual, sound, text, graphics, and so on, and still photographs, all these elements, because the brain can simultaneously handle all of this. The brain's capacity is digital, although the brain is actually wired physically like analog, but the capacity is digital. Whereas the body is perhaps analog, the way you eat, you digest, you eject, So the digital technology is the latest technology. It is new and now. It is because we cannot even speak authoritatively about this technology because we are living in the midst of it. We can talk about the Industrial Revolution with some sense of authority because we have the benefit of hindsight. We are looking back at what happened. Historically, we have distance. We are able to judge it. Whereas digital technology is something we are experiencing. We are the first or second or third generation beneficiaries of digital technology. So we don't know. The last word has not been said. How this will go, we don't know. Now, latest expression of that and the way digitization will combine with AI, let us say, and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how digitization will transform itself, what are the new forms it will take. Your guess is as good as mine. Much of it sounds like science fiction today, but what is science fiction today? Reality day after tomorrow. That's how fast-paced the technology is. The rate of obsolescence of technology is highest in human civilization today, right? Moore's law operates, the transistorization, chips, you keep multiplying this, so frenetically. So capacities are improving by the day. Our attention spans are reducing by the day. Newer and newer capabilities. So it's a mix of great things and not so great things. Some of these things we think are not great is because of our habit, a long habit, of getting used to something. When we see something new, a new technology which is privileging or prioritizing breadth rather than height or depth, we think, oh, this is less value. We think, oh, this is not as valuable as earlier days. Our older generation had more value. That is probably my contention is that's a false impression because we are not used to these things. I think the younger generation is able to have lateral thinking, able to grasp many things at the same time because this technology enables it. When I was their age, when I was 20 or 21 or 23 or 25, I didn't have the capacity to grasp so many things simultaneously. I had to do one in silos. Now there are no silos. It's like across the board. The pixelated world, I said, a pixelated world. So these are the big differences that have taken place. And therefore, in terms of media, the representative role of the media has also taken a huge shift. Because in the earlier days, the role, the media, what is our understanding of media? You know, there's this famous characterization of the media and what is happening around us by Jameson, you know, Frederick Jameson, the famous Marxist scholar who passed away just in September, last month, I think. He is a very influential Marxist scholar. You know, he has famously given this description, this grid, what is called the schema, where he says there are three historical moments in human civilization. Of the 1840s, you know, which was era of merchant capitalism. 1890s, the era of monopoly capitalism. And the 1940s, the era of multinational or transnational capitalism. And he says each of these eras have their own cultural expression. The 1840s, the expression is realism. Realism in theater, in prose, in poetry, the realism will be the dominant theme, right? 1840s. And the expression, the instrumental expression, the media expression of realism is photography. So 1840s, realism expressed as photography. Shift to 1890s, the cultural expression of 1890s is modernism. And the expression of modernism is cinema. Lenin famously called cinema the synthesis of all the arts, which combines music, spoken dialogue, images, sound, you know, so many things. Synthesis. So modernism. And the expression of modernism is cinema, right? So 1890s, monopoly capitalism, modernism expressed as cinema. Then we shift to 1940s. 1940s is the era of multinational capitalism. And the cultural expression of 1940s of multinational capitalism is electronics. I'm sorry, is postmodernism. Here it was modernism. Cultural expression is postmodernism. 1940s, postmodernism. And the expression of postmodernism is electronics. Even electronics is old now. Imagine, after 1940s, if you think about it, there has been no overarching cultural phenomenon in the world. There are, you know, streams, rivulets. You may say, what about Impressionism? What about Surrealism? You know, what about Situationist Internationalism and all of that? But those are all substreams. There is no overarching scheme like, you know, modernism, realism, modernism, postmodernism. So we only say in terms of postmodernism. If you ask people what is after postmodernism, they'll say postmodernism. After some more time, if you ask them, they'll say it's postmodernism. So that's how even postmodernism is what I'm saying. We have a tendency to think postmodernism is the latest, you know. Even that is old hat. And electronics is already old, which is the instrumental ecological expression of postmodernism is electronics. That is a television screen. Now we have gone beyond that. We have come to digital. So there is what is the equivalent of postmodernism for the digital? The technology has overtaken the cultural expression, really speaking. So we don't have that answer yet. And so these are exciting times. You know, the new cultural expression is in the process of being made. It is work in progress, is the other fascinating thing. So these set of parameters themselves are a fascinating challenge of digital technology. When you say challenge, we don't always have to think of negative aspects of challenge. Some of it is negative, some of it is difficult to understand, but they are fascinating challenges of digital technology of the time. When we talk about what is happening to digital media technology, digital media, independent digital media, that's the theme of the subject today. What we mean is, what are the obstructions that the state puts before digital media? I understand that. But I wanted to give this cultural historical backdrop, because only then the idea of digital technology will crystallize, will become clear in our minds. In that context, of course, when we talk about the problems that we face in terms of what the digital media, one of the big issues we face is the government's attempt, particularly the central government's attempts, particularly after the BJP came to power in the center, to regulate the independent digital media technology. And of course, it's called the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines. and Digital Media and Ethics Code, whatever it's called, rules of 2021. They have, luckily, the court finally taken a view that these may be violative of the freedom of expression. And so, while the last word has not been said, I think the government is not able to proceed with its scheme. Its scheme was very dangerous. It would have meant that the government actually censors all digital media, independent digital media, because you have to have an officer who is a complaints officer to whom any petition goes. It is referred to an independent committee, and if the petitioner or the complainant, who may be somebody who's put up for that, by vested interest for that, is not satisfied, that has to then escalate to a committee in which the ministry officer at the joint secretary level will be the chair, and then can go to the secretary level, and that ruling is final. In other words, government censorship of the media, precisely what was happening in the 1975-77. During this period, we saw the emergency and how the government, here it is not as explicit, it's not announced, but this process will take us there. Luckily, the courts have become a hurdle for that, for implementation of that, but I'm not sure the last word has been said there. Governments will try. And taking the cue from the central government, I find now many state governments are talking in terms of laws, the State Police Act, in small measure here and there, in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, and so on. You see, it is not necessary that the ruling party, the party which is elected by the people, are themselves thinking of this first. Normally, the idea will come from the police, let us say, or from a technocrat. In Kerala, I remember there was a move to amend the Police Act, to make some of these expressions in the social media, using digital media, giving police draconian powers to act against that. Now, I'll come to that. Social media has problems. But so then we were very concerned, and I was one of those who brought this to the notice of the Kerala Chief Minister, who was luckily a very liberal, a progressive man, as you know, Pinarayi Vijayan, and he immediately saw the danger of it, and he said, we are not going to go ahead with that. And at least the response was to me, because they may not have applied the mind fully. While the idea was in progress, they did not go ahead with that. In Tamil Nadu also, I found at some point that the government was talking about, under the chief ministership of Mr. Stalin, of setting up a verification system by the state government to verify whether all the news that is coming in the independent digital media, social media, is true or not, and to take action. Now, you cannot give the power of verification to the government. Government is not the last word on information. Information has to be free and digital, and only then it's free. Only then digital media is free media. So I don't know whether they have proceeded with that. Although we find the government, these are good governments, by the way. There are a number of BJP ruled states where they're probably already doing this. But I'm saying even progressive and what we consider better governments, when they start thinking of this, it shows the extent to which social media and digital media seem to pose a challenge, as in a negative sense, as a threat to them. The reason, of course, is, as we know, digital media comes with this corollary of the social media. The social media is a relatively new phenomenon, early 1990s. It's almost like yesterday. But over such a short period, it's become such a big presence in our lives, in our minds, in our psychology, that it is the backyard of the formal media now, the social media. Social media acts as a check and balance also on the mainstream media, because the mainstream media cannot now just say anything and get away with it, because immediately people are commenting about it. People are talking about it. People are saying this was wrong, this is right. On the other hand, social media also is a space of a lot of lies, a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation. Of course, you must know the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is something I get a WhatsApp forward. I don't know whether it's true or not, I forward it. So what I'm unwittingly doing is purveying misinformation into the social media sphere, into a social media platform, without realizing it's misinformation. That is itself bad. One should always not forward something unless you know that it's come from a credible source, that the person who has forwarded it is someone you can trust, and things like that. Those are filters we must apply. But far worse than misinformation is disinformation, where, let's say, a trolling operation is taking place. There are these troll camps, these troll, huge troll setups run by different parties, particularly by the ruling party at the center, by the Sangh Parivar, shall we say. Now, they put out a lot of deliberately false information, some of it very dangerous, which can create, shall we say, enmity between different kinds of people, people following different faiths. And with to promote their political agenda, mass mobilization to promote a particular political agenda on the net. And that is disinformation. That can be very dangerous. It can lead to very, very volatile, social situations, but it's put out there. And then there is fake news. So misinformation, disinformation, fake news. Fake news is lies, right? Plain lies. Now, unfortunately, we are living in a time where, as a consumer of digital media, we are all consumers of digital media. We can't help it. The moment you look at a phone, you have become a consumer of digital media, right? So we don't know what is right. How do we have the wherewithal? How do we have the ability, the capability to judge what is right, what wrong, what is not fake, what is vested interest, what is a deliberate political lie put out there? This is a big challenge. This is one of the biggest challenges digital media faces. And this threat or this dilemma is also being used particularly by the central government in these kind of rules they put out to control the independent digital media, because they're saying, if you say something wrong, there'll be communal unrest, there'll be a kind of violence, people will start, fighting with each other. So we have to control this. So this is where we are at now. We don't know how this is going to pan out, but I'm hoping that the courts and the people and our democracy will have the last say, and we won't be left to the mercy of the independent digital media will not be snuffed out. It is true that the mainstream media in this country has by and large been a huge disappointment, whether it's a print or television, right? And mainstream media is also there in the digital form, but they are normally cut and paste jobs. They are representation. Purely the print edition is reproduced on the internet, on the screen. That doesn't make it digital. It's not originally digital technology in that sense. Then podcasts are there, as you know. So the digital media today is actually challenging the mainstream media. We know that what is called Godi media is largely the mainstream media, dominant television channels. And those who are not Godi media were bought over. So they had to become partly Godi media. I'm not able to name even one mainstream television channel nationally. There may be, I'm not talking about in the regional languages, there may be one or two in each language, I don't know. Nationally, I'm not able to think of even one mainstream television channel which is truly independent. Some of them very, very craven. They lay themselves supine before those in power. As somebody said, as Advani said, of the emergency, Advani, one of their own men, and if you're asked to bend, you crawl. But some of them are selectively okay. They appear to be neutral, but when push comes to shove, they will go that way. Partly because, not because they are convinced in some of these cases, more liberal cases, because there are threats. There are insinuations, threats, there's withholding of advertising support, there are raids by IT or, by other agencies of the government, So naturally, the owners are very, very worried, and they ask the editors to be compliant, to be careful, not to get too bold. So that's the problem. Whereas the independent digital media has shown a backbone in many of the big issues that have continued to put in the consciousness of the public, it is because of the independent digital media. And when the independent digital media keeps at a subject for a long time, the mainstream media is forced to, acknowledge it, or at least note it, observe it, or at least, make a mention. Just like in social media, if something goes viral, some issue which is political or social goes viral, as you know, now mainstream media, whether it's print or television, they monitor the social media. If something goes viral there, then that becomes news for them also. That becomes an important element of news for them. This is the kind of things are in a state of flux, and this is where we are. But the bottom line is that the big threat that we face today in terms of independence of the media is a threat to our freedom of speech and expression. As you know, in India, there is no independence of the media that is guaranteed by the Constitution. There is only freedom of speech and expression for every Indian citizen, from which we derive the right press. As a journalist, if I want to say something, I don't have the right of a journalist to say it. I only have the right of an Indian citizen under the Fundamental Rights chapter of the Indian Constitution, under Article 19(1) A and G of the Constitution, which speaks about freedom of speech and expression, freedom to practice any profession. These are the main rights under which, and of course, Article 14, which talks about equality under law for every citizen. So I am able to express my freedom of speech and expression. Well, the US Constitution, for instance, they have the freedom of speech is enshrined in the Constitution. The very first amendment of the US Constitution says, Congress shall make no laws which abridge the freedom of the press. Congress shall make no laws which reduce the freedom of the press. So it is a constitutionally guaranteed right. So in the US newspapers and magazines, you will find they are able to say far more things far more boldly. They're able is a man who's standing as president, or is the president himself, is his mind okay? Is he mentally okay? They can write about that. Imagine if that here today, so there's a difference in having freedom of speech. That's a kind of extreme expression of freedom of speech, if you like, but they're allowed that. How they use that freedom of speech is another matter. I'm not saying, therefore, because there's freedom of speech, digital media and even mainstream media is very free in the US, they are therefore using that freedom for the benefit of the maximum numbers of the publics. They are using it for the benefit of the corporates, owners, and for the military-industrial complex, which the US is. I mean, if you take the Gaza war and what's going on, how it is represented in the US media, Israel is always given a bailout. Israel is even if Israel commits the worst crime, they will give it a kind of apologetic kind of report. They are all apologists for Israel's crime. The mainstream, even the liberal US, the New York Times or Guardian or Washington Post, or of course the television channels. And there is a kind of conflation that has taken place there in the media. There a conflation, particularly now, of if you say anything against Benjamin Netanyahu or Israel, it is seen as anti-Semitism. In other words, even if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitist. It's not the same thing. Anti-Zionism is an acute form of, it's a virulent political form, like Theodor Herzl's, formulation in the early 20th century. So this is, whereas if you're a Zionist, they'll say they'll say you're an anti-Semite, you're anti-Jew. Just as in India today, I think there's a parallel. That's why I mentioned it. If you say that anything against Hindutva, they'll say you're anti-Hindu. I'm a Hindu, but I'm not a Hindutva. You see, there's a difference between Hindutva. Hindutva is a peculiar, exclusive, form which other religions, which doesn't allow the freedom of, living as a citizen to others. Hindutva is a very exclusivist and an othering kind of form, acute form of Hinduism, which even Mahatma Gandhi was throughout his life fighting against. That's another story. Anyway, so this is the situation. Digital independent media today has the power to change and embarrass the mainstream media. Of course, the mainstream media, much of it has a very thick skin. It's very difficult to embarrass it, but it has the power to do that. And we are at that stage because of technology. This technology, essence of technology is not technological. Technology has enabled, along with all the fake news and all those who put out all the lies out there, also these credible digital media, news media. There are many of them. I won't mention names because I may leave out some, but you know which media is, you can trust, you can believe which media today. That's the digital independent media. So we are lucky to have that kind of media with us today, and whether that will, how that will change in the future is difficult for me to judge, because we are in the middle of that process. So it's work in progress. But there is freedom of speech and expression in the margins. Chris Anderson, the founder of Wired, Chris Anderson, he's one of the first pioneers, I think the founder editor of Wired magazine, WIRED, not Wire magazine, which Siddharth Varadarajan runs here. No, that's a news magazine. This is a technological magazine. Chris Anderson, he's a shall we say, a digital media guru. He talks about what's called, the title of one of his books is The Long Tail. So he says, how do you challenge the big corporate media? How do you challenge the Amazon or Facebook or X or Apple and so on? These are the big digital capitalists. You cannot be either. You have to become like them. That's also difficult because they have cornered the entire space. You have to depend on the long tail. The long tail of the digital media has so many independent entities like that one we are talking about, say Wire or Scroll or here in the south also we have Danya Rajendran's News Minute and so on and so forth. So like so if you add up all of those, that long tail will be able to hit at the head. This is called the long tail. Will be able to displace the monopoly of the head, which is controlling the media. That's how, because it is so many others. It's difficult to display. Even if you displace one more can grow there. Whereas if you destroy these 5 big ones tomorrow, I mean, there's no monopoly. Of course, it's wishful thinking. So the digital media's character, by definition, should be a character of democratization and devolution. Digital media should not be big. It's not. There should be limits to its growth. Today, governments are realizing that. In the United States, in Europe, in Australia, there are strong regulatory mechanisms coming into play to control the growth of digital media, particularly the monopoly of digital media. What we are doing in India is, instead of controlling the big players, because the Ambanis and the Adanis, I think, control 80 to 90% of the media today. Nothing is done against them. But all these small digital media people are gone after by things like this intermediary rule, for which one had to go to court and get a stay. So the rules are against any critical voice. It's not against the size of the media. Are you critical of the ruling establishment? Are you critical of me as who's a ruler now? Then I will use all the draconian power in my capacity to crush you, to defeat you, to finish you off. And they will send people after you. They'll put you behind bars. There'll be no case. But as you know, in India, you don't have done anything wrong. If they decide to look at you and put you behind bars, the process, as Rajiv Dhawan, one of our famous senior lawyers in the Supreme Court, said, the process is the punishment. Finally, you will be proved innocent and you'll be let off. Like some of them have come out now, like Probirpur Kayasa has, but Umar Khalid is still behind bars. Many others have managed to come out. Zubair, who had trouble for some, because he ran a fact-checking unit in Bangalore. Somebody from. So this is the nature of the play of digital media today, and this is very, very dangerous for us. On the one side, it's very exciting to be in digital media. On the other hand, we know that the states, unfortunately, not just the state but also the states, in the federal setup of India, in the state governments at different parts of the country, they are frowning upon this digital media, because when they see digital media, they don't see it as the digital media which is trying to provide empowering information to the citizens. They are looking at it like social media, which they see as a kind of corrupt media, and I can't blame them for that, because there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of false information, there's a lot of dangerous information which corrupts the mind of the young, which also incites violence in them, which puts one person against the other. So community-wise, creed-wise, religion-wise, gender-wise, and so on and so forth. So this is the nature of the social media. It's a free and freewheeling space. But is the answer to it to control it, to allow government to control it? Not at all. There should only be self-regulation. Of course, there are now self-regulatory bodies which control these, because any external control is censorship. There's no doubt about that. So I think this is what we have to understand from what we are seeing around us. I think I must have done my 45 minutes now. And these are my observations on the way the digital media is going. The threat to digital media, therefore, to sum up, is the obvious threat is obviously the role that the government is playing to legally or quasi-legally or even illegally suppress the independent voice of digital media. But the challenge, the more enduring challenge and the more insidious challenge, the challenge which is not so in your face or obvious, is the nature of the media itself. In that, there is both a challenge and an opportunity. And I think the challenge is that it is uncontainable space. When there are good players in it, there are bad players on it also. But the opportunity is that this can finally lead to the possibility of the long tail striking back at this monopolistic, dominant, organizing head. So that, I think, is the way it looks to me now. And the trick, therefore, is to organize a long tail and democratize the digital media. Because the media in a democracy is supposed to be the fourth pillar of democracy. Unfortunately, in our context, in a good part of our country, the media has become not the fourth pillar of democracy, but the fifth column of democracy. Fifth column, as you know, is is somebody, a mole in your own ranks, and that's the nature of the play of digital media in this country. Thank you very much.